I'm Georgina, co-founder of Smartphone Free Schools Rating, and we're going to tell you about how we're visualising data to help schools become genuinely smartphone free. Can anyone remember the first time that you saw a smartphone? I was 21 and I remember the magic when my housemate showed me the screen swiping up and down. I was a late adopter and I got my first smartphone when I was 28. It was amazing. For the first time, I actually replied to emails. It got much easier to organise things, take photos, send messages to groups for the first time. Smartphones are amazing. Over the last year or two, you might have seen the subject of children and smartphones discussed in the news. Should children have smartphones? Do they use smartphones differently to adults? What are their short-term and long-term effects on children's minds, their social lives, and their academic performance, etc.? The evidence has not really widely been known about until very recently. And also, it's not something that most of us have a reference point for from our own childhoods. Also, think how different the internet was back then, for some of us anyway. So it's taken us a little bit by surprise to find that there may be a couple of downsides to smartphone access in childhood. But parents are beginning to notice that something is up, and so are teachers. Turns out the kids are not just airdropping each other spreadsheets or maximising efficiency gains in their time management. We kids spend a lot of time on this subject, but today we're keeping it narrow because one thing is clear, that children do better in schools without smartphones, both socially and academically. So that point actually remains largely uncontested. In fact, the Policy Exchange think tank found that schools with effective smartphone bans achieve GCSE results 1 to 2 grades higher, despite usually being in more deprived areas. At the moment, teenagers average 7 hours a day on their screens. That's an eye-watering 49 hours a week. And they receive an average of 237 notifications per day. So it's not surprising that when you take a smartphone out of the classroom, the air clears and the children can focus better on their work and their face-to-face friendships. Research also shows that better smartphone restrictions lead to a drop in bullying, class truancy, in other words, not sneaking off to watch videos in the toilet, class disruption, and more. There's loads more. Recently, some schools have been implementing better restrictions. When this happens, secondary school teachers report miraculous things. So some things I've heard teachers say: the lunch hall got noisier because they're talking to each other. Children have started playing games again, like tag. One teacher said, it's like we've got our children back. One teenager candidly reported, I used to just Google the answer under the desk, but now I understand the questions because I have to understand them. And this doesn't represent the norm, but twice I've heard when a head teacher's announced a full ban that students have given a spontaneous round of applause. So many feel a sense of relief at having their addictive and disruptive devices removed and not having to keep in the loop all day on their phones. So what is an effective ban? Well, there's a whole range from bring your smartphone for class, but only use it if we tell you to don't bring it even onto the school site, but you could bring an old school brick phone just to call and text. So the Policy Exchange found that only 11% of secondary schools have effective policies. So that would be where there's phones removed for the whole day, locked away, handed in, or just not brought in at all. At Smartphone Free Schools Rating, we wanted to show in a simple way that not all bans are the same. They lead to different outcomes and to reward the best policies. So we collaborated with head teachers. These are two of our co-founders who are head teachers, and they led a council of head teachers to help us to come up with a rating system. We bounced off the Department for Education guidance, which gives examples. The 2024 one. So these are our categories. So we've got gold, no smartphones on site, but basic phone could be brought. Silver, they're handed in locked away. Bronze, or they're switched off in your bag, in theory. So you can see the numbers there, the registrations that we've had so far. But we did suspect it might be a bit of a slower burn getting head teachers to register than parents, so we've got a crowdsourced option as well, so 633 policies known about to us. Obviously there are loads more. I checked yesterday, there are 578 golds so far on our map, which Luke will show you in a minute. But yeah, overall the aim of the scheme is to show that the gold standard is an option that schools are taking, share best practice and encourage head teachers, and creates a language around quality, and it's a tool for parents to talk to their schools as well.
So my name is Luke, Geospatial Lead at Smartphone Free Schools Rating. Georgie and I actually both work for a company called GeoPlace, and I know some people know we know you under that capacity. So this is, again, a charity which we do in our spare time with a lot of passion. So Georgie's covered the mission and the objectives really to spread the awareness. So I'll cover some of the, well, not getting harassed by the mic here. I'll cover some of the key website requirements, which essentially translates into how we've used FME and FME Flow. So in June 2025, we were lucky enough to have an event to attend, which was essentially the launch of the website, which is absolutely fantastic. So we identified two key requirements. One is that we wanted to have a map to display the school registrations. And we know working in this industry that a map in its visual sense is so powerful in conveying complexity, information, and it allows you to access that and process it and actually synthesize it. So we wanted a map on the website which had all the sign-ups for the school registrations and the ratings. We wanted that to be used by people as part of the campaign as an engagement tool, by head teachers as an engagement tool, and also parents to see what's going on with their schools and that kind of school ecosystem. We also wanted that map to be updated daily as well, just to make sure that the data was current and people are seeing the latest information. Secondly, it's all great having a map, but we need to capture the sign-ups and the registrations. So we actually made the decision that let's keep people on the map, let's keep them engaged with the content, engaged with the data. So we wanted the sign-ups to be initiated from the map itself and also commenced by doing a school search. So you search for your school and then you take that user journey on from there. There's quite a lot of requirements I've just mentioned there. We needed a map, we needed a list of definitive schools, we needed some integration, there's spatial technology, there's lots of data, there's lots of ETL going on. None of that is really possible if you don't have tools, licenses, storage, all that type of stuff. And as a charity, which we're doing voluntarily, I'm lucky to say we're in such a supportive industry in the UK. We engage with Esri UK, and under the non-profit programme granted us use of Arc Pro and ArcGIS Online, which is fantastic, and also Safe Software for FME Form and Flow under their humanitarian grant licence. I'll mention the valuable input by Avineon Tensing later on. So the initial process in an FME context, I describe it as a manual monolith. I'm not proud of it, but it was just to get the job done, an MVP if you like, for that to meet that launch date. First up, we needed definitive schools. Where did we get that from? Well, the respective governments for England, Scotland and Wales. Gov.uk and Scot.gov. We got these in Excel format. Other formats are available, but that's the best one we could work with. We then fired up FME Form, pulled in that data, conflated the schools into one single table, cleansed it, centralized it, and also created a single address line field, which we then used in ArcGIS Online web app builder to power the search. More on that later. There's a red flag on there, local on my laptop. Yes, I was doing this on my laptop. Again, having spare time, I don't have a server or anything like that. I've just got my personal laptop. So I'll mention how we've moved forward from this position a little bit later. So we've got a definitive list of schools. What else? We need registrations. We need a medium to capture them. So we used a forms product called Tally Forms. It's just like any other forms product, but it had two requirements, or two functions which we liked. One was it had two-factor authentication, so we can identify or have a little bit of robustness about who is actually signing up for a school or registering against a school, and also query parameters as a quick query sorry, I'm going to start again. Parameters within a URL, which we then use to pre-populate forms that we've set up. This was the results of these. So once these forms are filled out, they're pushed to Google Sheets. And this was really important actually, because if we're using registrations from parents or head teachers, which is being displayed in a public context on a map, we want to have some type of human in the loop aspect here. We don't want that data just to flow through into a public-facing environment. So Google Sheets enable that to happen. Anyone can log into it as part of the team. We have a flag field, which means it's been manually processed, manually vetted for that individual sign-up, and the FME process essentially picks up that flag to say, yes, I'm going to pick this up, and then push it onto the map. So very basic, nothing groundbreaking there, but just something to consider when we're doing this kind of public-facing data translation. So we use FME to power or to create the list of schools. We've got these registrations from parents or head teachers to say, yes, my school has a smartphone policy and it's of this rating, or a parent can do that in the crowdsourced sense. In FME, we take these registrations, we link them to the schools, and then we utilise ArcGIS Online through a web app builder, experience builder, to create a web map, which is what we then display on the website. Again, this whole process was on my laptop and was manual. It was manually updated, but more about that, how we move forward from that position. This is what the map looks like on the website. You can see it's very basic, but that's all it needs to be really, I think. It just needs to indicate sign-ups, registrations, and the levels of what schools have obtained. You've got a search at the top there, and the definitive list of schools that we've kind of conflated into that single table. That's what's powering that. So you search for a school, or you can click on a school to view some more information, and it will essentially come up with a pop-up. The school I found here, Noah Hill High School, doesn't have a policy registered against it, and you can see some options there: register schools only, or register for schools only, and that triggers off a tally form, or a form essentially, so the head teacher can actually sign up. Or if you're a parent or an interested party, you can register as a parent, and that simply just allows you to say, yes, there is a policy, it's not official, but here's the link to it. And then that's why we had to have that manual verification step, just to make sure those links weren't going to anywhere nefarious or bad, if you like. Once the school has signed up, using FME again, there's lots of conditional logic behind the scenes to determine what the user or parent or head teacher can then do next. There's some few options here. So this is an unregistered school, crowdsourced, but the person has said it's gold. This is not coming from the school itself. There's still an option here as a school head teacher to register that formally, and also there's still an option there to update the link to the policy. So in FME, very simple conditional logic, but there's still lots of data crunching going on behind the scenes. So we created the minimum viable product. Fantastic. It was there for the launch. We managed to do that and have something to show and tell and engage with. There were some issues though, from my perspective. It was on my laptop. That's a big no-no. There's no resilience. If I broke my laptop, spilt something on it, dropped it down the stairs, God forbid, that's the end of it. What then happens? Next up, manual reliance. Me running this process in FME form every day. That's a big no-no. A single point of failure once again. And also being a charity, doing this in our spare time, we had a lack of time, lack of budget, if you like, from whatever funds we've raised, and limited skills to actually move to something a bit more robust. So for example, a server or architecture or a cluster or whatever. I don't have the knowledge for that. We don't have the budget for that, or outside of our day jobs, the time trying to do that with struggling, social lives, family lives is very difficult. So the overall risks and impacts of the way it was, yes, there was a single point of failure. We had little or no resilience, and there was a lot of optimization required. This monolith was just taking a long time to run every day. And maintainability wise, don't know if it's just me, but when I'm in the throes of doing something in FME, I've got multiple streams, things which are not used, things which are disabled, things which are enabled, and it's a little bit chaotic. Not many bookmarks, not many annotations. Anyone else in the same boat? Good stuff. All right. So maintaining it was an issue, but help was at hand. So at the GeoPlace conference, Dave was there. We had a chance conversation with Dave to say, oh, look, FME, what are the opportunities here of using FME Flow Hosted? And that struck up a lovely relationship between us and Avineon Tensing, which they very kindly offered some pro bono support in the form of FME Flow Hosted as a managed service, consultancy and technical support to try and break down those challenges that we had, I listed out in red, into something a bit more robust that we can rely on. So the optimized automated process that now exists is this. We still obviously need the school's data, but that now doesn't need to happen every day in that monolith process. It happens, say, every 3 months. School's data doesn't change all that much. So this happens using FME form whenever we deem there's a big enough change, and that passes out the data to Google Sheets, which again is cloud hosted and accessible by anyone within the team. The core change, fundamental change, is the FME Flow hosted or managed hosted instance, which Avineon Tensing provided. So every day it runs at 10 p.m, it processes all the registrations, it picks up all the schools, joins them together. We then know which schools have got a rated smartphone policy or a crowdsourced policy against it. It handles all that kind of change detection and what URLs to the different forms to present. And again, it outputs that as an ArcGIS Online feature layer. This is all automated. It's, it's set once and you can forget it. It's 365-day resilience. You get notifications if things go wrong, if things go right when the job is completed, and it's scalable. And that's exactly what we need to know is this job performing? Is everything okay? Now, a key fundamental advantage of this is I don't have to do this every day, which is great. It takes that pressure off me, but the resilience as well. This website, this public-facing website can continue to move forward without any human intervention unless something goes wrong. And that's been such a time saver. And that allows us to look at other aspects of how we can push this campaign. So utilising the same data which the FME Flow Hosted service and FME Form kind of creates, we're now looking at creating more engaging platforms using the ArcGIS Online Web Experience Builder to create a standalone app which has a lot more richer functionality for head teachers and parents and anyone else to interrogate the data, look at the data and see what's actually going on around them. So that's just a preview of something which is coming soon. But if you wanted to find out a little bit more about the initiative and what's happening in this space, there's a lovely case study written by Safe Software which you can find there with the QR code. But that's all from us. Thank you very much.